Tonight we're telling a story that should never have to be told. A 7-month-old boy, born into a world that should have protected him, is missing. His name is Emmanuel Haro. His parents, Jake and Rebecca, say they were victims of an attack and a brazen parking lot kidnapping. But investigators say the kidnapping never happened, and that Emmanuel likely died from abuse before the day anyone called 911. This is the case that stunned California and made national news, not because it resolved quickly, but because every new detail deepened the heartbreak and outrage. The timeline begins with a report that seized public attention. On August 14, 2025, Emmanuel's mother, Rebecca Haro, told authorities she'd been assaulted while changing her baby's diaper outside a store in Yucaipa, a community in San Bernardino County, and when she regained consciousness, her infant was gone. Deputies flooded the area, news choppers lifted off, the alert went out, but as detectives retraced steps, they found inconsistencies they could not reconcile with a stranger abduction. 8 days after that report on August 22, investigators arrested both parents on suspicion of murder and filing a false police report. The story the public first heard, an attack, a diaper change, a vanished baby, was, according to the sheriff's investigators and prosecutors, staged. The search shifted from a rescue to a recovery. Prosecutors then made a grim allegation. They believe Emmanuel was the victim of ongoing abuse, that he likely died days before the parking lot tale, and that the false report was part of a cover story. Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin stood before cameras and said the case filing reflected a belief that Emmanuel was abused over time and succumbed to those injuries. The allegation is brutal, the stakes are absolute, and yet the hardest fact of all remains: no one has found Emmanuel's body. Authorities say this is now a rare, no-body murder case. As detectives pressed their investigation, search teams fanned out across open terrain, including stretches along a Southern California freeway. At one point, investigators said the father provided some cooperation as they combed a field, but nothing turned up. The absence of remains does not erase the case. Prosecutors have moved forward based on evidence they say points to abuse, death, and a staged narrative. In early September, both parents were arraigned. Jake Haro, 32, and Rebecca Haro, 41, pleaded not guilty to murder and to filing a false police report. Each is being held on $1 million bail as the case proceeds. A court date has been set on the calendar as pre-trial activity continues. Defense counsel has either declined comment or emphasized the right to a fair trial. The court will ultimately weigh the evidence, and the presumption of innocence remains until a verdict is reached. The national attention didn't come from spectacle alone, it came from the collision of two storylines Americans know too well. First, the frantic search for a missing child, in which minutes feel like hours, and communities open their doors, their garages, and their hearts. Second, the betrayal embedded in a false report, when investigators say the emergency that mobilized a city never happened. When that realization hits, it can feel like a second crime, against the neighbors who searched, the officers who combed fields in triple-digit heat, the journalists who broadcast alerts, and, most of all, against the dignity of a child who cannot speak for himself. There is also background here that prosecutors have put on the record, background that intensified public anger and turned this into a debate about accountability. Officials revealed that in 2023, before Emmanuel was born, Jake Haro pleaded guilty in open court in a separate child abuse case involving another child, a little girl who suffered catastrophic injuries, rib and skull fractures, a brain hemorrhage, injuries that prosecutors say left permanent damage. The district attorney publicly criticized the sentence in that earlier case, a work-release term and probation instead of prison, calling it an outrageous error in judgment that in the DA's view allowed further tragedy to unfold. Those remarks, and that record, are now part of the public narrative surrounding Emmanuel. As this case moved from local bulletins to national coverage, large outlets documented the rapid evolution. A missing baby alert that dominated Southern California broadcasts, the arrests 1 week later, and then the court appearances and not guilty pleas that signaled a long legal battle ahead. The Associated Press, the Los Angeles Times, CBS News, and Newsweek all tracked developments, underscoring how swiftly a story can shift from "find this child" to "seek justice for this child," even when the ultimate evidence, the recovery of remains, has not been found. The community response has been raw. Neighbors described shock and sorrow, and search scenes near freeways drew cameras and cell phone live streams. In comment after comment, people struggled with the same impossible question: How could anyone harm a baby? Those who work in child protection will tell you the answer is not simple, and it is not rare enough. The point of telling Emmanuel's story now is not to sensationalize pain. It is to notice the warning signs earlier, to understand how systems made decisions in prior cases, and to press for practices that keep children safer next time, because there is always a next time, unless we change something. What happens next will be decided in courtrooms, not in news feeds. Prosecutors will lay out their timeline, their forensic findings, their witness testimony, and whatever digital or physical evidence they've collected. The defense will test every claim. Judges will make calls on admissibility. Juries, if this proceeds to trial, will carry the weight of deciding what happened to a child whose voice we will never hear. For the public, the right thing now is to track the facts, distinguish between confirmed reporting and rumor. And remember that even when outrage is justified, outcomes must rest on evidence. If you want us to keep telling these important truths, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. For anyone watching this who needs a concrete takeaway, here it is. If you ever suspect a child is in danger, you do not have to be certain to act. In the United States, you can call the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4-A-CHILD, 1-800-422-4453, or visit childhelp.org for chat and text options. If a child is in immediate danger, call 911. In many jurisdictions, you can report concerns anonymously. The worst outcome of a false alarm is an awkward conversation. The worst outcome of silence is what we're talking about tonight. Emmanuel's name should never fade behind the headlines. Missing remains do not make him less real. Courtroom calendars do not make him less important. If the allegations are proven, accountability will be the law's answer. But community memory is ours to carry. Say his name, learn the signs, push for better decisions when courts weigh risks to children, and refuse the numbness that sometimes follows a case like this when news cycles move on and the hardest questions about prevention, supervision, and sentencing are left for later. Before we close, 2 essential notes of fairness and fact. First, both Jake and Rebecca Haro have pleaded not guilty. They are entitled to due process and nothing here substitutes for a verdict. Second, the absence of Emmanuel's remains means this is, by definition, a nobody case at this stage. Prosecutors say the evidence supports the charges. Defense counsel will challenge that evidence. Our responsibility is to stay with the truth as it emerges, not the version that is easiest to feel. AP News Newsweek. If you followed the early alerts, if you shared a post, if you prayed, if you searched, thank you. Keep paying attention. Keep asking questions of the systems meant to protect children. And if you know anything, anywhere about this child, speak to investigators. A just outcome is built on hard facts and brave witnesses. If you want us to keep telling these important truths, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe.